Hello, this is Lee
Kelly.
and we are here to talk to you about change for the health of it. So you're in the right place if you are looking to grow, learn more about yourself, and create an awareness that allows you to reach your goals, whether they be in health or wellness. Like I said, I'm Lee and I am an ACE certified health coach. My passion is helping people heal their relationship with food and their relationship with movement to have healthy habits that let them be their happiest and their healthiest.
I am also a health coach. I am certified with IAN and I'm also an esthetician. I focus on building beauty from the inside out, and I do that by concentrating on gut health and emotional health, and that in turn helps heal inflammatory skin conditions and hair conditions.
All right. So today we are going to dive into a topic that can create a lot of discomfort because it kind of forces us to face our demons, and that is awareness. What are your general thoughts about like trying to be aware on a day-to-day basis, Kel?
So, I think a lot of people, I don't want to say walk around being unaware, but it's very easy for people to numb, which we kind of talked about last episode. So I think as a society, we're not really taught to be aware of our actions or our emotions or our behaviors. So I think kind of defining what awareness is would be a really important place to start. So the way that I
Okay.
define awareness is the ability to kind of sit with yourself, your feelings, your emotions, your behaviors, and to see how it affects your well-being.
Mm.
And it could be emotional well being, it could be physical well being, but just that ability to self reflect.
I think you tied in a lot of things, but what really stood out to me with that definition was being able to be present with yourself.
Mm.
Because I think that is the part I find so often that clients struggle with, like this idea of like, how do I even find time to be present?
Right.
um, and I think you're spot on. Like that's where it starts is being willing to take a second and actually ask yourself some reflecting questions of like, where am I at?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? What else would you have to add on to that, if anything?
I think like when I think about what does awareness allow for, like what is it and what does it allow for?
Mhm.
I think awareness is our understanding of our own connectedness within ourselves and the greater world. And so, like, you were talking about decisions, I think that's a huge part of it. But I think even allowing yourself to be aware of the things or aware or cognizant of
Mhm.
the things that are bothering you. So
Yeah.
when I think about awareness, like I often think that we're very good at like numbing the parts that we don't want to be aware of and
Mhm.
targeting and hiding those specific things. And that's what often gets us in trouble. Is we're like, wait, ooh, I started to feel this emotion. No, no, no. I don't have to choose to engage with this. Ooh, Netflix, Instagram. And we just like push things at that feeling.
Yeah, but I don't even think it's an actual decision because a decision requires awareness. I just think it's like this autopilot thing that our brains do, where it's like,
Oh, that's
oh,
so funny.
I don't think people willingly go, oh, I'm feeling this, so I'm going to numb. I think it's just something that we've kind of learned to do, almost as maybe like a protection mechanism. Um, but I don't think people are even really aware that like Netflix is numbing or like Instagram is numbing. They're just like, oh, my brain and is a break for a little bit. Kind of like what you said, like do 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 do. So I think it takes a certain level of awareness to even realize that you're numbing, to push those negative feelings away.
For sure. I think, I've seen with my clients that they're often aware that they are doing something that they doesn't serve them, that isn't adding to their life, that isn't contributing to their goals, but they're not aware of why. They're
Mhm.
not aware of why they continue. Like, I don't want to scroll on my phone until 12 o'clock at night.
Mhm.
They're aware that this behavior is causing them problems. They're not aware as to the psychological or the mental phenomenon that keeps them repeating a cycle that doesn't serve them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've been finding really interesting when digging into awareness more and more is like a lot of us are aware when we're doing something we shouldn't be or doing something that doesn't align with the goals or the things we've committed to. We're
Mhm.
like, ooh, definitely said I was going to eat enough protein today and I skipped lunch. Like we know in that moment we've done something that isn't aligned. We might not be allowing ourselves the presence and awareness to go, why?
Mhm.
Am I overbooking? Am I overscheduling? And so I think that's what I find so interesting about it is because, like you've kind of shown us, there's different levels to awareness.
Yeah.
And so you might get an initial understanding of something you're doing, but it doesn't mean you understand why you're doing it, like you pointed out.
Yeah, and I think to kind of add on to what you say with your clients when you were saying, they might be aware of like, hey, I was supposed to hit a certain amount of protein today, but I skipped lunch. But like you said, I don't think that they read too much into it where it's like, oh, what's the reason behind this?
Right.
It's just something that I'm doing in my day. I didn't have time. It's just something that I'm doing. I didn't hit my protein today. I'll do it tomorrow.
The old, or, oh, I've got that Monday. Or, February's tough. March for sure. And
Right.
a lack of awareness allows that. Like, it's not an actual thing. I just missed it today. And I think you're so spot on. And that's often how it can snowball. And you wake up 3 years later and you go, wait.
I'm still in the same mood.
I swear. And on those lines, because it's happened to us all. When
Yeah.
was a time, Kel, that like you look back now and you realize a lack of awareness negatively impacted you? And what were the consequences? What lesson did you learn from that?
I'm actually going to bounce this question to you first
Oh,
because
of
I'm
course.
very curious to know what you have to say about this because I have ample examples, but I'm not quite sure which way we're going
Oh,
with
we
this.
were
So I'll let you.
second. Well, so, you know, I don't want this show to only target health things. And so, like, it would have been really easy for me to, I'll let all y'all know listening. I just wanted to come and be like, I ignored my health but guess what? Like, that's an easy story for me to tell. It's one that I have become very good at telling. One not so easy to tell is when my husband and I were struggling, and instead of trying to target the issues within our relationship, I started numbing with food. And I think this is actually like probably the first time I'm like really publicly talking about this in this way, but it resulted gradually after like 1 or 2 years in me having a full on binge eating disorder. And I had a terrible relationship with food prior to anything that went on here. My history is very that's a story for another time. But let's just say I was primed and ready to have an eating disorder of some kind. And when I found that I wasn't able to connect with my husband in the ways that were most meaningful to me and that my needs weren't being met, the pain that I felt was so extreme I couldn't face it. At the time we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and then it creeps up on you in a way where you go, but I've been with this person X amount of years. Like at this point, him and I have been together 12 years. We're happily married. I'm absolutely in love with him. Hey, Brian, thanks for letting me share about this. But at the time, it was one of the worst times in my life. And I could not allow myself the awareness to say, what are you in pain about? And so kind of like Kelly pointed out at the beginning, like I was aware I didn't want to be in a McDonald's drive-in every day after school. I was very aware of this. I was aware I didn't want to go home and throw up day after day. And yet, the pain and the struggle that I was in, the isolation I was in, had me repeat a pattern that was not only detrimental to like my mental health, my weight, but to my literal body, my kidneys, my organs trying so hard to work. But I had an addiction to food that, like, I look back on and it scares me. Like, I can't believe it had that kind of power over me at some point in my life. And it was because I chose not to be aware. I said, I can't handle this pain. I'm not going to look at it. And it's one of the single biggest mistakes I ever made. And so, like, if there's someone listening right now, I share this story because I think dynamics within couples and married couples are so often something we pretend like everyone's doing just great 24/7, and that's not really the case for any couple. And if I had chosen to be aware in that time of my life, I would have saved myself so much pain, so much illness, so many hospital bills. And so, like, if you're out there and you're choosing to numb your pain, I just kind of first want to honor how much pain you must be in to keep choosing that over and over again, because I know it sucks. And then I also want to tell you, take one step to get away from it. You'll never regret taking one step to get away from it, and just start asking yourself simple things about what you want in life. The question, does this feel good to me? Simple as that. And if the answer keeps being no, it's probably time to build some awareness around it.
And I just want to say thank you for sharing that, because I know that it wasn't easy to share. But I also, just to kind of recap on one of the things that you had said, I think it's interesting that you say that, everybody kind of believes that everybody is doing the best in relationships like all the time and everybody is winning. But I also think it's very normalized. It's very easy for people to normalize, like, oh, everybody fights. Like, everybody is unhappy in their relationship these days, and to numb that way as well. So I think it's kind of like the both of extremes. But I think a lot of it, awareness affects your emotions, and not being aware of your emotions affects every aspect of your life. Like you were saying, it affects the decisions that you make at work. It affects, whether or not you go to the gym. It affects what you're eating. Like you were saying, not having emotional awareness affects everything else in your life. And I think that that's one of the biggest takeaways from this episode, is that if you aren't willing to feel the feelings and sit with them and figure out what is going on, then you're going to be stuck.
Yeah.
So I had shared last episode, a time when I had decided to numb and, go into a relationship that wasn't healthy. And again, I'm going to stick with the emotional aspect of it, because that's kind of what's happened for the majority of my life and my relationships. I didn't sit down and take the time to figure out where these ideas came from of things that I thought that I deserved, maybe like trauma that I've had in the past from my childhood growing up, of being told by like dance moms, like, oh, hey, you can't really wear that costume because, your tummy's a little bit too big, or, being bullied during elementary school or high school, not addressing those things and not really looking at yourself and saying, I deserve better, I deserve love. You tend to put up with a lot of different things. So I'm going to kind of jump back to something else that I had shared when I had been engaged. I was very, very unhappy in that relationship, and I kind of took it to the opposite of extreme, where like I worked out every single day, twice a day, and like I would restrict my calories, and we would go out and we would party, and like that would be like my emotional release. But we would be fighting all the time, but then we would go out and we would have fun, and it was just like this very turbulent cycle of fighting, and then kind of like this roller coaster of making up. And I think, had I taken the step back, like you were saying, and I eventually did have awareness of what I was feeling, and that this wasn't healthy, and no matter what I did in that relationship, it wasn't going to improve. Like you said, I probably could have saved myself a lot of time and a lot of frustration and a lot of heartache, stepping away from that relationship earlier. And I think that that's with any type of relationship that you're in, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a work relationship.
Right.
You have to really evaluate how you feel around that person, and is the situation able to change? And if it's not able to change, how do you react to that?
100%. I think What really stood out to me when you were describing that is you were like, "Oh, well, eventually I did." And I think isn't that just so much kind of the point here is a lot of these things we're choosing to not be aware about, we're choosing not to take that second about, we eventually pay up. Like, it's not like it's like, and forever. Like, most of us eventually have to pay up financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, in
All the
some way.
above. All
or
the above.
you're paying up with everything.
Right.
Like, and you're right. Like, in the moment, it might feel like, okay, oh, well, how bad could X be? And you know what? Most things we numb ourselves with, like, is going to McDonald's inherently evil? Not in my opinion. I think, like, I wouldn't wreck it. I don't think I learned my lesson. I'm like, but is it evil? No. The corporation, maybe. Going there? No. Okay. Is having an hour where you're scrolling on your phone evil? No. We're not talking about these, like, huge extreme things. So it's easy to go, it's not drugs.
Right.
I'm not drunk all the time. I'm not this, I'm not that. It's easy to give ourselves reasons that it's okay. Whatever we're doing is okay.
Right.
But if you're not happy, you're not healthy, you're not fulfilled, is that okay? And
Right.
I don't think any of us agree that it is.
Right. And I think a lot of it too comes with how you were saying, you ask yourself, is this worth it? It really isn't that bad, because you're protecting yourself from an inherent pain that you're going to experience.
Listen to that one, guys.
By not doing this thing with you, is the food really that bad? No, but when I get rid of the food, then I have to deal with the emotions. Me, is the relationship this bad? No, because if it is, then I have to break it off, and then I have to ask myself, am I okay being alone by myself? And
Right.
that's a whole other slew of things to address. So I don't want to say Pandora's box, because it's not, but it leads to all these other questions that you then have to answer and spend energy answering. And that can seem very, very daunting and overwhelming when you're not emotionally well.
You're spot on. I think, like, it is okay to be listening to this and go, wow, imagining trying to change the things I'm numbing with right now, that's overwhelming. Like, whoa, you guys, slow it down. I really liked when we were talking about boundaries. Can we go? Let me tell other people what to do.
Very hard boundary around that one. We are not going to touch the things that I'm numbing with. Nah.
It's a no from me, dog. But in all seriousness, like, Kelly mentioned the word pain.
Yeah.
And I think this is something to double down on. I really do. Because when I meet with a client, pretty much it's not a question of what pain point are they presenting with. It's a question of when will they share it. To this day, I have not served a client who did not have a pain point connected to their emotional eating, their binge eating, or their inability to create structure around the habits that they want to have.
Or their obsession around unhealthy beauty standards, in my case, and having to normalize what beauty is for certain people.
100%.
Yeah.
And no one wants to feel pain. Like, as humans, we do everything. I mean, anxiety itself is a mechanism to try to plan to avoid pain, right? Like, a lot of the things that we talk about now on a regular basis as a society, we're mentioning more and more. A lot of it has to do with the fact that many of us have very real, very significant things of pain that have happened, especially since the pandemic. And as a society and a culture, we are navigating how to heal in a very strange time. Unprecedented, some might say. And yes, people, I'm joking. But, like, that's the truth of the matter. And so I do think, to a certain degree, as adults, we have the responsibility to, at some point, if we notice consistent pain in the same way, like with me, why am I going to the bathroom throwing up every single day? there was no way that felt good. There was no consistent pain was present. And it was my job, and I did eventually say, nah, we deserve better than this. And I think that's what it comes down to. Like, you deserve better than to waste your life. We get one life changing your existence, changing your reality by numbing yourself to the things that are present in your life.
But again, that takes awareness.
And
needing to sit right, and self-reflection of what you deserve. And you need to be in the headspace to figure out what you deserve. And that's not the easiest thing when you have trauma and pain.
100%. And I think you've mentioned the word reflection a couple of times this episode. I think, like, you're so right that being able to kind of dig into our own brains is obviously how we develop awareness.
Yeah.
Where did you get started with reflection? Like, what kind of tools, or what is it that you do to kind of find time to process in that way?
So I actually think it's funny because this is something that society kind of pushes for women. You know, think about it when you're little, and what is one of the gifts that you get when you're like 5 or 6? You get a diary.
With a pink one with a special lock.
With a special lock that you can literally just like pick, which
every
actually
time
does nothing.
Mom and Katie got me every time.
I had a Black Beauty one, and you would just like slide the little piece of paper out of the side of the lock because I lost the key to it.
Do you hear us 90s diaries makers? Get those locks fixed.
Seriously. But I think that it's very interesting that, you know, society does, in a sense, push young women to reflect and share their feelings. And I think that it's a really important tool. It obviously changes from the time that you're like 5 or 6 or you're a teenager and you're like spilling your heart out about everything versus, you know, when you're older and you're practicing for awareness. But I think being able to journal out your feelings is very helpful. I know for me that if I'm having a very, very strong emotional reaction to something, or there's a big conflict going on in my life, if I have all these thoughts running around in my head, and I think that's where this anxiety plays in, is like, I'm planning, you know, how do I avoid this pain?
100%.
1,000 little situations are going through my head. And if I take a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, however long it takes to sit down and ask myself, you know, what are you afraid of happening? What is the reality of the situation? What are your options? Or whatever you want your questions to be, it helps to get everything out. It helps to organize my thoughts. It helps physically seeing it written down so I can give my brain a break.
Yes.
It's almost like a healthy form of numbing, because the same
catharsis.
Right. The same relief that I feel from watching Netflix or having the ice cream or whatever you like to do to numb, I'm now getting from doing something productive where I can see like, hey, this could be a path forward, or, you know, it's really not as scary as we thought it was. Like, maybe we're ready to take that first step. So I think journaling is a really good way to do that, a good introductory way to do that. What do you do, Leigh?
So, before I jump in, I just wanted to highlight, like, absolutely, I think journaling, and you kind of mentioned that you use reflective questioning techniques where you kind of like map out what you're going to journal about. I think that's incredibly important to highlight to listeners, because I find time and time again, people aren't necessarily anti-journaling, but they're like, what do you want me to write about?
Right. I heard that about my, like, diary.
So I think it's so great that you kind of like set the scene for people where it's, you know, you can just go off the cuff. That's what I do when I journal. I'm like, all right, blah, blah, blah. But I also love writing. So for me, that feels a little more natural. If you're someone just getting started, you might want to write things out like, what is one emotion I feel right now? Mm-hmm. Where in my body do I feel that emotion? Mm-hmm. What is one thing I can do now to take a step forward? So if you're listening, there's 3 questions that you can get started with, you can tackle, and just start the very long process of building awareness. For myself, I have found that being outdoors is one of the most essential elements for me to calm down enough to really be able to connect with myself. And it's taken me my whole life to figure this out. I always knew I had like an affinity to want to be outside. But I've actually started, I've never been like huge with like walks. Like I've done them with my dog, like I'll do them, but it's never been something that I've held a commitment to or a goal to. And right after the holidays, when I came back to work with my clients, I noticed my anxiety was like getting out of control in a way that it hadn't been in quite some time. And I think it's just like, getting back into your routine jitters after you've been away for a little bit. I was like, all right, I can no longer stand just waking up and feeling like this until 6 p.m. So I said, what do we know about ourselves? So again, if you're trying to build awareness, ask yourself, what do I know about myself? I know I love my dog. I know I like being outside. Let's see if daily walks are a time where I can gather awareness. So I set a half-hour block in the mornings. I've been taking Draco every morning for a walk. And I know people are so tired of hearing about power walks, and this isn't me trying to convince you to walk. It is me saying your setting can influence how aware you are. If you're like, let me practice this moment of awareness, and someone's cooking, and the TV's blaring, and the dogs are barking, yeah, man, that's going to be really hard. Like, maybe you can do it. I know I'd be like, because I can't pay attention to that many things. Whereas when I control my setting, I make sure I'm somewhere calm, somewhere where I'm not going to get unexpected interruptions, and I can be present. Then when I go, what is it that I'm feeling? Where am I feeling it? What's one thing I can do today? I have the clarity to take a step. And I do think when building awareness, like Kelly said before, it's very overwhelming to try to go from numb to like, now I'm aware of everything in my life. Like,
Enlightened.
That's not going to happen. And so it's literally just saying, I'm a little more aware. A little more. And just keep asking yourself questions and try to choose one topic. One pain point at a time. Because like Kelly said, we've had multiple pain experiences. Tons of them. One at a time. And I think that's kind of what I try to do too.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that you kind of tied in the aspect of self-soothing, because a lot of people don't know how to self-soothe.
Yes.
It's something that we learn as babies. If your parents let you, cry yourself to sleep, then you learn to self-soothe. But I feel like as adults, it's not a tool that we have in our tool belt anymore because we have that numbing. So by asking yourself, what do I find comforting right now? For you, it's Draco and the outdoors. I agree with the outdoors, or, it's physical movement because it gets those endorphins going.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's figuring out how to soothe that feeling of anxiety so you can get to the deeper emotions past of I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling angry, because those are two, again, like we've talked about in previous episodes, those are two very easy emotions to get stuck on. And if you're able to self-soothe out of anger or out of anxiety to figure out, okay, what are the deeper emotions that I'm feeling, past the anger, what is it that I'm anxious about? How can we solve this? Then I think that those are really important tools to have. And I love the reflection questions that you offered for people to start journaling with. How would you say, like outside of journaling or outside of exercise, what are some other ways that you have found that you can help your clients or that you practice or Brian practices?
Well, so first I will say, like, the biggest tool for awareness is therapy. So I'm just going to start there. Ya gal has been. And I will tell you, in terms of my own, like, emotional maturity as well, I think, like, therapy was very important to that. I'm a very goofy person, and in therapy I learned a lot about, like, that's great, but you have to be able to listen as much as you want to put out. And that has allowed me to not only then be aware of myself, but like my impact on others. And so I think, like, if you're looking for a place where, like, you sold me, give me awareness. Well, I offer therapy is great. But if you're not at that point, if you're like, listen, Lee, you're really pushing now. I think there are a couple of things. Number one, I would say I've had clients find that through connecting with previous things that created joy in their childhood, it gives them the comfort and presence of mind to be able to then sit and reflect. And so a great example is I have a client who's a dancer who, when they find themselves struggling, will allow themselves to just flow. Like no routine. That was something we had to figure out because it turned out with an instructor, it didn't allow for the same peace and freedom, which was like sorry, I'm getting nerdy now. But so she figured out free flow dance that would calm her to a point where she could sit with herself, be aware. Another client that I have has this VR reality treadmill. Yeah. So not accessible for everyone, but she's in a really cold state. And so because walking is her way of creating awareness. I have another client, loves to kickbox. Before kickboxing, she's here. She can't even talk, cannot process. After, all right, Lee, what are we talking about? And so, I think the most important and most essential thing I can tell you is it has to be authentic to who you are. I've had so many clients be like, well, I hate journaling. And I'll go, great, then that's not what we do. And they're like, what? I thought we had to. And it's like, you don't gotta do jack, people. You do what actually helps you calm down. And maybe you don't know that. Most of my clients don't have an answer to the question, what creates authentic joy for you outside of work, family, and friends? A lot of people don't have it. But then through exploring their past, they go, wait a second, cooking does that for me. Gardening does that for me. Crocheting does that for me. I'm listing hobbies, people. Hobbies let you connect with yourself, calm down, and ultimately, if you create that trust within yourself and you're building that confidence, you're going to be able to be more aware. And so we literally will set like joy and creation metrics with many clients because it allows them to go, all right, here's one way. Draco is not happy that Brian came home, everyone. He's not having it. He's not having it. Young mom, retreat. Okay, so we're back. Yeah, and in seriousness, a lot of it comes down to being willing to dig into your past and think about what was meaningful to you and how can you bring that back into your life now. So like you mentioned before, you're creating rather than numbing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that actually is a very funny thing when you ask people, tell me about yourself. What are things that you like? Well, I love spending time with my family. I, really enjoy what I do for work and, okay. But like, what are your hobbies? Well, I don't know. So that is a very interesting point. What would you say that you're focusing in on in your personal life in ways that you're practicing awareness?
So I'm going to be super candid. And one of the ways I'm having to practice awareness currently is within the realm of my own like strength training journey. And it's because I am starting to build muscle and I will catch my brain going, am I getting bigger? Right? There's this part of me that's still there, that's still scared. And I have to go, yes, we're working very hard to do that. Aware that I had the potential for body dysmorphia and frankly to just beat myself up about my body no matter what, I wouldn't in that moment now know to go, where exactly are you talking about on your body? What do you mean by that? And so like you said in the beginning, it took me a long time to get to the point where I could recognize that that was not serving me. And I've had that thought my whole life, right? So it took me a long time to realize it. But that's something I'm pushing myself so hard on right now. Like, no, you're gonna post the picture to Instagram even if there's a role. You're going to stop thinking that your skin or hair has to be perfect to post the reel. Like, you can't create an authentic community where you're telling people it's safe to be themselves and then be scared to be yourself.
Yeah.
So you either want to do this for real or you're chickening out. So you tell me. And like, that's literally what I said to myself. Are you a chicken? Is that what this is? And the answer is no. Like, I've been conditioned to believe certain things have to be done. And now I am unconditioning myself of these beliefs. And I would say, like, that is the thing I am focusing most of my energy on, is like staying aware to catching myself when I am doing something that I know doesn't serve me, doesn't serve my clients, doesn't serve other people seeking to heal. And like refusing to let myself get caught up in that repeated diet culture BS that like has hurt me and many of my loved ones so much.
Yeah, I think that that's a really big part of it. And I think, being authentic to yourself is a huge part of being aware. And, it's not always easy to, be authentic, which I think speaks to vulnerability. But
Love that connection.
yeah, I think that the two kind of go hand in hand. So I applaud you for that.
What do you think? What is something right now where you're trying to stay really aware and like navigate it?
I think just communicating with people in my life, I had talked about in previous episodes, really kind of digging into my ADHD diagnosis and how, my behavior kind of not reflects the diagnosis, but like can tie into the diagnosis, like how I had said, interrupting people, like little emotional outbursts, but also sitting with myself and going, is that really what's going on? Is it
Mm.
that you're having little emotional outbursts, or is it that you're actually upset about something? And making
Mm.
sure that I take the time to kind of differentiate between the two, and I'm not just like using the ADHD diagnosis as like a catch-all for everything. So that's been interesting and reflecting, and it's taking a lot of time, but I'm starting to understand the difference between the two. And I think, really figuring out what my triggers are and being able to speak to my triggers clearly. And like we've talked about in previous episodes, if, speaking to those triggers don't work and, it still feels like I'm going into conversations with somebody like, oh my God, I'm dreading
Yeah.
this, I'm dreading this, then it's limiting, conversations with those people if you can, or if you're continually pouring into somebody's cup and they're not giving you the same energy back, it's pulling back your energy to meet theirs, or removing yourself from that situation completely. So I think that's something that's taken me a very long time to do, because similar to what you've said in previous episodes, I tend to be a people pleaser. I think it's a big part of my job and being in the service industry, having done that for 14 years. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'm focusing on right now.
Well, I think first off, you said the time part again, which I just hope people keep hearing again and again. It's going to take time. It's
Yeah.
not linear, and it's okay to have bad days when you're trying to be aware too. Like,
Yeah.
it does leave you vulnerable to some pain that like might not feel great, but it will help you move forward. And what you kind of showed is like you can honor your feelings and ask yourself, do I want to keep feeling this way?
Yeah.
And I think that's such like because a lot of times we think if we're questioning something, it means we have to automatically change it right then and there.
Right. Day at a time.
And really, awareness. Hold on. If you're looking, someone says that. But it's very true. Like, if you're seeking to build awareness, you have to say it's okay that I feel this way. I don't
Yeah.
want to keep feeling this way. I'm going to create, but it's okay. I'm safe with myself.
Right.
And that was a really excellent example of like how that might mean honoring a difficult emotion, even if we might say want to change it as well.
Right. Right. We see it, we want to change it. It's okay that we're not changing it right now, but
Right.
we're aware. We're aware.
You're taking that
On my radar.
Wait, I really actually think that this really broke awareness down into this own thing. It's like you can't change something that you don't know is happening.
Right.
So the first step to creating whatever change you are seeking, whether it be in your health, in your relationships, at your work dynamic, the first step is becoming actively aware about what's really happening. What is actually happening in your real life lived experience?
What's the reality?
What's the reality? Collect that data, folks. And when you've got it, that's when you start making choices. And so, like, don't confuse awareness with, I'm making a bunch of decisions. No. Awareness is the part where you can say, I don't like what this is. I don't know what to do yet. I know this isn't it. All I know is this is not it. I don't know what to do yet. Let me collect some data on this to see what I really want.
Yeah.
And if you give yourself that time, if you just let yourself start thinking about it, that opens the door to creating the life that you want, a meaningful life, the one that you want.
I think you just hit the nail on the head.
So that leaves us with this problem, though, because we're in a world of distractions. We're in a world where numbing is just incredibly easy. So I could do it right now. Like, it's so easy. So in a world where, like, we're, inundated with ways to numb, and it's pushed on us by our own society, what do you do to kind of, like, make the time to have a second to be aware or reflect?
Well, I think about like how we talked about goal setting in our first episode. At first, it's going to be hard, of course, because it's something new that you're introducing to your routine. It may feel really uncomfortable, but I think setting aside some time either before you go to bed at night or before you do your numbing action,
Ooh, love it.
before I watch Netflix or before I go eat this carton of ice cream, I keep on eating ice cream. Maybe I really want some ice cream. Or before I go have this carton of ice cream, let me sit down and journal for 5 minutes or go for a walk for 10 minutes or, just kind of like really let myself zone out and, sit in my body and feel what I'm feeling. And I find that a lot of the time, if you do that first, then you don't necessarily want the numbing thing. And you're like,
I
oh,
love.
let's dig into this some more. We made some progress. Like, let's keep going.
Intriguing. I like where this has gone so far. And you're like, so you just use a principle of behavioral psychology that is, like, so awesome. And you have it stacked. I'm like, wow, that was amazing, because you're spot on. Don't ask yourself to either I do the hard thing or I watch Netflix, because you're going to lose every time.
Yeah.
Tell yourself exactly what Kelly said. If you know there's X thing you want to do, habit stack the behavior that's going to help you with the habit that's not serving you. If that's where you're at, if you just need something to get started, that is a phenomenal way to get started in building your awareness.
Yeah. What else would you suggest, my little psychology gem?
Well, I think I do agree with goals. Obviously, like, there's always going to be a time, but when I was thinking about, like, what about when you're, like, the most depressed version of yourself? And I've been in that space where it's like,
you can't.
I'm convincing myself to eat. I'm convincing myself to shower. Like, I'm not journaling. It's not gonna happen. And so I wanted to offer a little suggestion. Hold on one second. I forgot to bring it over.
Oh boy.
Okay, so if that's the place you're in where you're like, hey, Lee, love ya. I can't even get up in the morning. A one-sentence journal. You can either just get a notebook and write a sentence a day, or you can get something like this that gives you a little bit of structure to write a sentence a day. You tell yourself, I'm going to write one thing a day. One sentence of how I felt in that day. If you start collecting those snippets, that's your data. Right there, you have one. Now, 2 weeks later, you have 14 days of data to look through and say, I can't do a lot right now, but hey, look at this. This same thing happened for 7 days. For 7 days, I felt mad about X. Maybe that's the thing I tackle.
Yeah.
It'll just give you a place to get started. And I think more than anything, that's what I was hoping anyone that could listen today, like, had just a place to get started.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good way to do it, especially, like you said, for people who are struggling. I think starting slow, even if you're not struggling, even if you're just really kind of averse to this idea,
Yeah. Great.
I
Yes.
think that that's a very good way to start. I do think that there are a lot of stigmas around therapy and journaling and, self reflection and feeling the feelings. And, if that's you, then the one sentence place is a good place to start. What is one
Exactly.
sentence going to do?
Exactly.
A lot after 15 days, but one sentence in a day is nothing.
It's manageable. And like, if you're someone that's trying to change, but you're overwhelmed, focus on what feels manageable and just keep building it one layer at a time. I'll use my little corny saying I love to use. You are an onion! And Kelly, what happens when we cut onions? We cry. So don't cut through the onion. Don't try to rush the process. Go one layer at a time, and you'll find that's the way you love yourself to health.
If you still cry at something.
We usually do. It's inevitable. Don't tell them that.
No cry. You put your goggles on, you don't. So I think that about wraps this episode on awareness. As always, thank you for listening. If you would like to get in touch and give us an idea for future episodes, we will include our email below and our Instagrams as well. We would love to follow you guys and monitor your progress, share your wins with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you are listening and you want to DM either one of us with like, here's what I'm trying to be aware about, could you help me with some reflection questions or anything like this? Our DMs are open, and I'm too old to care about that.
You are. Yeah.
Bye, guys.
We'll see you next episode.